Hani, many thanks indeed. We're now just going to take you straight to Copenhagen. Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories, is holding a press conference. Let's listen in.
Surprised to see the room pretty packed and so many of you here, given that I was quite negatively surprised to understand that just yesterday that two prominent media outlets in this country suddenly decided to cancel our long scheduled interview without any explanation and just our side of my visit. So I do think that, like in other countries, including my own, the Danish media ecosystem is not immune to pressure. But I guess I was wrong, and at least there are exceptions. So thank you very much for being here. Velkommen til alle sammen. Look, I have a dense program ahead this coming few days to talk about the human rights situation in the occupied Palestinian territory. Here at the request and invitation of a coalition of Danish civil society actors and grassroots organizations who have worked hard for months to prepare this visit. We are at a very interesting and dangerous crossroad. I think everyone senses it. After 15 months, the ceasefire in Gaza and the hostage mutual release. There are also prisoners, but also on the Palestinian side, there are many hostages. These offer a ray of hope. There is no question. However, the situation on the ground remains catastrophic despite all this. But let me start by putting the occupied Palestinian territory and my legal assessment in your mind. Last year, I concluded after 6 months first and then 12 months of investigation altogether that there were reasonable grounds to believe that Israel had committed acts of genocide in Gaza. I also said last year that Israel used what I called humanitarian camouflage, used to justify its operations in Gaza by using international humanitarian law jargon like human shields, collateral damage, safe zones, and evacuation orders in order to justify and to normalize the assault, the reckless assault on civilian life. And this has been used to camouflage acts of genocide. And in my second report, I argued that I had continued to document the attacks in Gaza, but also that the violence that we had seen in Gaza was leaking out across the rest of the occupied Palestinian territory. And this was part and parcel of a process of colonial erasure. The arguments that Israel wants to eradicate Hamas, whatever it means, or liberate the hostages, were not the main drive behind the wholesome destruction that Israel has unleashed against Gaza. As I warned on the 12th of October, 2023, Israel would have tried to seize the opportunity to get more land and forcibly displace the Palestinian people. My words were prophetic, in an attempt to reproduce what some politicians called a second Nakba. And in the process, it has committed acts of genocide under the fog of war. Israeli public officials have openly advocated for a total erasure of Gaza and for forced displacement of Palestinians, as it had happened in 1947-49 and in 1967. All this to realize a state of Israel for Jews only from the river to the sea. This continues as we speak, because the genocide of the Palestinians is still ongoing. Just as it did not begin in 2023, we know that genocides are processes, not acts, not single acts. Genocide is a different crime than war crimes and crimes against humanity. We cannot look for the intent with the magnifier. We need to take a step back and see the intent, the intention to destroy a group as such, a people as such. And the past 15 months have led to the destruction. You know that already. I mean, I'm sure that I don't need to go through the list of data, the 70% of homes destroyed, no more universities, no more schools, few hospitals still standing and still decimated, unable to function. There is no possibility to resume normal life in Gaza. And plus, the people who now move across the rubble looking for the remains of their beloved ones, trying to give the dignified burial to them, or they are genocide survivors. They have survived 15 months of relentless bombing and killing, including through sniper fires. There is documentation of children who have been shot in the torso and in the head. And they have been living in tents without any access to water, any dignified access to water, shelter, food. And this is, I mean, these people need to be helped. This is what we should really absorb, that this is a population of genocide survivors and they need to be rescued before thinking of who's going to rebuild Gaza. Of course, Gaza is going to be rebuilt and will be rebuilt, but no one has the right to say how Gaza will be rebuilt other than the Palestinians. This is something that we need to absorb. And let me go fast forward. I'm shocked to see how little the international community, including countries in Europe, have registered the seismic paradigm shift that has been prompted by the ICJ, the International Court of Justice advisory opinion last year. The fact that it's an advisory opinion doesn't mean that it's not binding. It's binding because it's premised upon non-derogable norms of international law. This advisory opinion has concluded that the Israeli presence, not just the military presence, Israeli presence, both army and settlements, is unlawful. It is to be seized unconditionally and as soon as possible and totally. So Israel needs to remove whatever material, immaterial, tangible, intangible, civilian and military it has established in the occupied Palestinian territory. Full stop. And there is also a deadline for it to happen, the 13th of September this year. This is what the General Assembly has given as a time frame for Israel to comply. And you know why? Because the occupation crushes the right of self-determination of the Palestinian people. We Western people do not understand what self-determination is because we enjoy it, because we have it. Self-determination is the right to exist free as a people, to determine oneself as a people, politically, economically, culturally. This is something that the Palestinians cannot do under Israeli rule, including in the little that remains of their land. Gaza Strip, West Bank, and East Jerusalem. And let me remind everyone, this is the land that international consensus, I would say at least 192 states, minus Israel. Things might change right now, but it might become 191. It's still okay. It's still international consensus. Recognize the right of exclusive rights of self-determination as stated to the Palestinians, which doesn't mean that Jewish people cannot live in the occupied Palestinian territory. If they want to live there, first of all, it will not be on stolen Palestinian land, and they will not be Israeli citizens. They will be under Palestinian law, as simple as that. Meanwhile, Israel needs to withdraw. And look, in the face of all this, and this will be my last comment, I'm also shocked by the defiance of toward international law, not just of Israel, but most countries in the international community, particularly the West, which has been preaching about compliance with international law with each and every country in the global South for the past decades. The ICC has issued arrest warrants on 2 Israeli leaders, 3 Palestinian leaders as well, and they've been Hamas leaders as well, but they've been killed already. So there are 2 people who, and there should be more in my view, who are wanted by the International Criminal Court. And a number of countries have run forward in order to ensure that these people will be sheltered from accountability. So have fully embraced impunity. The International Court of Justice has concluded already in January last year that there was a plausible risk for the rights of the Palestinians in Gaza protected under the Genocide Convention, meaning it has recognized the plausibility of genocide and it has issued not once, twice, 3 times provisional measures that have not been complied with, of course by Israel, but not just by Israel, because all member states, including Denmark, have clear responsibility toward international law. They should suspend all ties, especially economic and military ties with Israel. So the question you should ask your governments, if you have not done it yet, is what are you doing to comply with the ICJ advisory opinion, with the ICC arrest warrants, including by securing that there are all domestic mechanisms in place to investigate and prosecute anyone who might have committed crimes in the occupied Palestinian occupied Palestinian territory. It's regrettable that, in fact, the government in this country is moving, but in the opposite direction, because I understand that it intends to pass a law to make investigation and prosecution of the crimes committed in Palestine, and trust me, it will be applied elsewhere, more difficult. So guys, as someone who deeply believes in human rights and justice, I firmly stand against this lawlessness and encourage the government of Denmark to comply with its obligations, to stop doing anything that translates into aiding and assisting Israel's unlawful occupation, apartheid regime, and recently an ongoing genocide. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's open up for questions. I would take questions in the room first and then online. Please use the mic as you pose your questions. If I could ask you to state your name and the media outlet you're with. Yeah, so starting over here in the front row.
Thank you, Francesca. I'm Michelle Rasmussen from the Executive Intelligence Review in the United States. And I have 2 questions. The first is, I have a question about implementing an OASIS plan for peace through economic development and connecting a political solution to an economic solution. Because my magazine and its founding editor, Lyndon LaRouche, back in 1975, came out with an OASIS plan for cooperation between an independent Palestine, Israel, the regional countries, and now also possibly including the Chinese, for water desalination, new water transfer canals, and basic modern infrastructure. So do you think that something like this could help break this cycle of violence and hate by creating a future vision of cooperation for the benefit of everyone, which could help pave a path from genocide to peace and give people hope? Because you said in a recent interview that what we do for Palestine is a test for humanity. Of what we want to do next. So could you comment on the need for international cooperation for reconstruction and economic development, including something like an OASIS plan to ensure a decent future for Palestinians? Then I have a second question, if it's possible.
You want to have a couple, or?
Yeah, I can take a couple of questions.
Let's have the other one.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other question is, of course, what do you say to President Trump's statement yesterday that the United States should take over Gaza Strip and throw out all the Palestinians?
I was waiting for this question. Before being the special rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territory, I've devoted a decent number of years to the question of Palestine as a UN official first, and then as a scholar. And I know the question of Palestine through the perspective and through the story, the experience of its people, Palestinian refugees. In fact, we shouldn't call them Palestinian refugees. We should call the Palestinians Nakba survivors, because this gives for the Palestinians, the fact of being a refugee is not just being having it's not just a matter of legal status. It's a matter of having been deprived of a homeland that, as Edward Said used to say, existed one day and is no more. And so as such, I can tell you, for decades, the international community has treated the question of Palestine as something that could be managed in perpetuity through means of development, economic incentives, and encouraging growth, whatever it means. Or managing it as a humanitarian crisis. And frankly, after, let's say, at least the 56, 57, but in fact it's 76 years, it doesn't work. And you know why? Because of course economic development must happen. Of course cooperation is necessary, but not at the expense of fundamental rights and freedoms, which is what Israel, the United States, more openly than ever, and others seems to expect that the Palestinians will accept. Like all indigenous people in the world, the Palestinians will never surrender. They will fight and they will resist. I mean, when I say fight, I do not mean armed resistance. They will fight for recognition of their rights and their dignity. And so, no. The short answer is no. Economic peace through economic development is expectation of surrender, and it will not work because everyone has the right to be free and to, again, self-determination as a people. This is a collective right.
The question was including a sovereign Palestine.
Well, but this is not what has been talked about. I mean, the argument of sovereignty is used as a rhetorical one. I mean, just to kick the can in the air, because then when it comes to, the only thing that is to be done to allow a Palestinian state is not to fund, excuse me, Ambassador, is not to fund the Palestinian Authority, is not to tell the Palestinian Authority how to reform. This is not of our business. We don't go to other countries telling them, we should probably in some countries tell people, advise people whom to elect. You're from the US, right? And we don't do. So the same thing applies to the Palestinians. I mean, the only thing we need to do to ensure that the international community needs to do to ensure a Palestinian state is to make sure that Israel withdraws troops, settlements, controls over resources. As simple as that. There is no other way around. The rest is hypocrisy. And frankly, the world has had enough of it. So no, it's not going to happen. And so the next point you are raising is economic development going to break the cycle of violence? No. No. I mean, and if there is one thing that I'm 100% sure of, the answer is no. And this is, I mean, what happened in the last 15 months, what happened 15 months ago, and what has happened over and over, the violence in Palestine. And let's be very, very blunt. Palestinians, they are not violent people. They are people who want to live in peace and freedom. And the fact that they might have resorted to violence at various points and they might have committed crimes against the Israelis during 76 years of dispossession and displacement is to be read as mirroring the violence they have been subject to. So the only way to stop the cycles of violence is to give peace a chance through freedom, through full recognition of freedom. And this is not going to bring to a decent future for the Palestinians only. For the Palestinians and the Israelis, I always have tried to have this inclusive language because there are few Israelis who are fighting against genocide, against occupation, and against apartheid, and they should not be invisibilized. They are an important actor in the process. President Trump, where to start? The short answer to your question is what he proposes is utter nonsense.
Is what?
Utter nonsense. Is nonsense. And it's unlawful. What he proposes, people talk of ethnic cleansing. No, it's worse. It's worse. It's forced displacement. It's inciting to commit forced displacement, which is an international crime. Forced displacement and further dispossession. And in the context of a genocide, it will strengthen the complicity in the crimes that Israel has been committing over the past 15 months and before. It's unlawful, immoral, and irresponsible. It's completely irresponsible because it will make the regional crisis even worse. And I truly hope that people will stay calm, will not panic, and will remember that the international community is made of 193 states. And this is the time to give the US what it has been looking for: isolation. But this is the opportunity to revive or to give a meaning to cooperation premised upon respect of basic rules. Like international law is there for a reason. And Lucas, there is the Hague. I don't know if you have followed the initiative launched recently by nine countries in the Hague Group, a number of states who have committed to implement basic measures to ensure accountability and end of impunity in the occupied Palestinian territory. This is a model that others should follow. And I truly hope that Denmark, who has been very principled on other matters, on other regions of the world, joins the group and the initiative.
Thank you, Ms. Albanese, for being with us today. And I will start first by acknowledging and revere your position that has been always very consistent with the facts on the ground. People think that you are biased for the Palestinians, but in fact, you have been the most pragmatic rapporteur that we have ever seen since 2022. And saying this, let me start by a premise which is going to shock the people here when it comes basically to the resolution of this conflict. I believe that today Palestinians and Israelis are stuck between the historically inevitable and the politically impossible. And we rely on the international community to shoulder the two-state solution, which has been adopted since 1994 as a result of the Oslo peace process. And unfortunately, the United States, that were supposed to be the honest broker of peace, became a total partisan in trying more or less pushing the agenda of the Israelis over the Palestinians. And of course, the Americans have lost their credibility, not only among the Palestinians, but among even the Arab world. And today we have a president that I would consider daringly a bully, who is trying to bully the entire world for achieving national interest to the United States. He deals with the Palestinians as if we are ants. He could, move us from Gaza, rebuild Gaza, make it Singapore, a place where the Americans could thrive, economically, without paying attention that the Palestinians' struggle for self-determination is the 14th article of a president called Woodrow Wilson, where the international community have practiced that right, except for the Palestinians, which is considered to be today one of the longest modern occupation in history. And, we have seen the onslaught of Trump, let alone Biden, on the agencies of the United Nations, especially UNRWA. And the recent onslaught on UNRWA to close down their offices in Jerusalem is a sign that there is no right of return for the Palestinians. This is killing the refugee issue. And this is what they're trying basically to do. The United States wants to eradicate the Palestinian problem by forceful diasporization, by displacement, by ethnic cleansing, and by supporting Israel to basically control that part of the world with a close proximity of interests of the United States in the region. And today, what we are witnessing in the Middle East is a dramatic, draconian changes that is going basically in the wrong direction. And this is partly of the non-unity of the Arab countries, where they are fractionalized in their positions when it comes to US policy in the region. And I think if we cannot get united with the Europeans and with other countries, and today, you know, the threats of Trump, you know, for Europe in terms of tariff, Canada, and what have you, you know, all these signs, if it proves something, it does not prove the Pax Americana that we wanted to see back in the 1990s. We are seeing a total hegemony, a new imperialism that's been basically trying to impose its position on the world and trying to unilaterally rule over the world through its hegemonic processes. And of course, you know, as you are a human rights lawyer and you represent the United Nations and you are very well spoken on this issue, to what extent do you think you, coming from an Italian background, from European, you could have a certain kind of impetus, I would say, on the European countries to start moving? Because we cannot see any kind of change coming from the Middle East itself. It has to come from the Europeans, who are considered to be the natural allies of the United States. And in particular, you know, I would like to see the government of Denmark talk the talk and not walk the walk. And this is what is happening today, where they are totally submissive to that of the diktat of American policies in the region, regardless of their, you know, position in terms of human rights and in developing Palestinian infrastructure. But we don't see a clear position on the decimation, the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians by this government, which is considered to be a rightist government. And that's why I think, you know, it's about time that we have to shoulder our responsibilities as an international community. We have to push for the International Criminal Court justice resolutions, and we have to continue our struggle democratically and not by using violence. Violence is rejected by the Palestinians, and I speak in terms of the authority of the Palestinians. We are against violence. We don't believe that violence is going to bring our rights for self-determination, but it's through political accommodation. And we have done that in 1988 when we had our historic compromise, painful compromise, in accepting Israel on 78% of the land and accepting 22% of the remaining of Palestine. And this is our position. We believe that through pragmatism, through political accommodation, through negotiations, as recent US presidents have promised us, where we can see the oxymoron represented in President Trump that negates all kinds of agreements in the past and opens a new avenue for a continued conflict in the Middle East. Thank you very much for your presence, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Ambassador. There was a question in there, but let's have another one, also in the interest of time.
Yeah. We can also take more questions so that.
Yes. Thank you. My name is Usama. I'm from Jordan News Agency. I have a couple of questions. You started by saying that a couple of Danish media channels canceled their arriving here. I've been with you. So my question is, how do you describe the Western media coverage of what's happening in Gaza and the occupied West Bank? Now, that's the first question. Being in Denmark, my second question is, how would you, what's your message to the Danish government regarding the ICJ resolutions and regarding that Denmark is exporting weapons to Israel?
Mm-hmm.
So we have 3 questions in there.
Yeah. First, a comment. Whatever the Israel's ambitions in destroying UNRWA, again, which is another abysmal phenomenon which shouldn't happen, because UNRWA is a subsidiary body of the General Assembly. Only the General Assembly can decide the future, the mandate, or the cessation of the agency. So if Israel, the United States, and other member states who are defunding UNRWA are against the continuation of the agency, they need to go through and respect UN law and go through the General Assembly, not operate outside the system, because this is unlawful. But however, it will not kill the right of return, simply because the right of return is established under international law that predates the creation of the State of Israel. So this is something, this is something that people need to absorb. The impetus I can give to European countries as a person, look, my role is pretty limited, in the sense that the United Nations expect me to monitor, report on the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory and produce a legal assessment. So to assess the human rights situation, which, as I said, is catastrophic. And of course, I make recommendations. I've done the utmost to deliver my mandate in the most effective way, which is making sure that people listen. And what I think I might have helped Palestinians especially, but also the Israelis who stand with them for a non-apartheid land between the river and the sea, is to make sure that people understand the framework. It's not what we should stop calling what happens in that land as a conflict, unless we understand that it's a conflict of a very specific nature, which happens in a settler colonial paradigm, where Israel let aside its foundations, etc. But since 1967 has actually pursued and steadily pursued policies to acquire the control over the land that remained of Palestine and displace its people, its residents, its inhabitants. And this is what settler colonialism is about. And of course, as history should tell us, if we bothered to look at it and learn from it, is that settler colonialism is intimately, quintessentially genocidal, because it will result sooner or later in the annihilation of the indigenous people if succeeds. Look at the United States. The United States is a country birthed from a genocide. Many genocides, in fact, as Native American scholars teach us. Many genocides. And so there have been many genocides in Latin America and in Africa. This is our history as a European. Denmark has its own. Of course, there are major colonizers, but and Denmark has its own history. But it's so probably you don't feel that responsible for the past, but it's our European past, and so we should do better today. So this is what I aim to do. Continue to bring attention to the facts, the context, the history, and what are the international law obligations. And here, let me move to then I will go back to what I think of negotiation. It's a risky argument. But the question of what is my message to the Danish government? First of all, my visit aims to speak to whomever wants to listen. And I think that those who want to listen the most here, considering the demand, is the Danish people. So the point and the message is, my ask to the government is, please respect international law. You have clear international law obligations. Under the law of state responsibility, Denmark is called upon not aiding and assisting an internationally wrongful act. And Israel maintains an occupation which, as I said, is ontologically illegal. So the Danish government should should reveal all the ties that it maintains with Israel, diplomatic, political, military, strategic, research-wise, and should suspend anything that, according to the ICJ advisory opinion, is found potentially detrimental to the rights of the Palestinians.
You're watching Al Jazeera. It is 10:13 GMT. You've been listening to Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territory. She's been talking in Copenhagen, and it's following a press conference, that was held by US President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the last 24 hours, and comments that came out of that press conference. She has said that the Palestinian people are survivors of genocide. She said they should be helped. She criticized those European countries, particularly, who were choosing to ignore, as she put it, rulings by the International Court of Justice. She said that ruling had been a seismic shift caused by the ruling. She said only Palestinians have the right to decide how Gaza is going to be rebuilt. She said also that she was shocked by the reaction of certain countries, particularly in the West, to the ignorance, as she put it, of international law and arrest warrants set by the International Criminal Court. They should never, she said that those countries should sever ties with Israel. She said Palestinians are not violent people. They want to live in peace and freedom. If they have reacted to violence, it is because of violence they have been subjected to. She also referred to statements made by Donald Trump with regard to Gaza and the possible rebuilding of Gaza and the moving of people in Gaza to other countries. He said Donald Trump's proposal is nonsense. It is unlawful. Forced displacement, she said, is a crime.